Why did she feel invisible the moment she stepped into the briefing room? Sergeant Haye stood in formation, heat pressing down from the Arizona sun, sand biting at her skin. Around her were Marines hardened by deployments, their movements sharp, practiced. They belonged. She wasn't sure anyone thought she did. A logistics transfer, a woman in a sea of infantry veterans clutching her gear too tightly. The stares told the story before anyone spoke. She doesn't belong here. Who led support personnel into sniper school? The voice came from her left. Sergeant Tyler Cooper, broad shoulders, perfect fade haircut, confidence oozing like sweat. His tone dripped with mockery, loud enough to draw laughs. "This ain't a desk job, sweetheart." The laughter spread down the line. Jaw clenched, but she didn't move, didn't respond. She learned long ago that silence cut deeper than words. Her eyes stayed forward, her breathing steady. Yet inside, her chest tightened, anger, shame, the sting of being underestimated again. She thought about the notebook tucked into her pack. Handwritten ballistic tables, every variable, every equation mapped with care. She thought about the nights back in Montana when her father stood behind her, guiding her hands on the rifle, whispering patience into her ear. It's not about speed. It's about truth, the wind, the earth, gravity. They don't lie. Respect them and the bullet will do the rest. But standing here among men who treated marksmanship like a contest of reflexes and bravado, her truth felt small, dismissed, ignored. The helicopter's rotor wash faded, and the lead instructor's boots hit the dust. Captain Morgan. His face was leathered from years of sun and deployments, his eyes sharp, unreadable. He paced before them like a man weighing worth by silence alone. His voice was gravel dragging across the assembly. Then he paused, eyes falling on, and "Lady." A smirk ghosted across his lips. "Welcome to hell. For the next 12 weeks you will eat, sleep, and breathe precision marksmanship. Most of you will fail. Some of you will quit. A select few will call yourselves scout snipers." His gaze lingered on a second longer than necessary. Not curiosity, doubt. Inside, her chest burned. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her flinch. The day unfolded in blistering rhythm. Marching, orientations, introductions to the qualification range. The motto painted on the barracks wall read, "Quick on target, first on trigger." Stared at it longer than she should have, her throat tight. Everything she believed, the legacy passed down from her grandfather and father, clashed with those words. Quick, fast, instant. But war wasn't instant. She knew it. She'd seen photos of her grandfather's Korea winters, frost biting at his hands as he steadied an M1C, patient beyond endurance. She'd heard the hushed tone her father used when recounting the night outside Kuwait City when his single shot had saved a platoon. Slow is steady, steady is life. Yet here speed was everything. Later in the barracks, while the others joked and sharpened their egos, sat alone on her cot, unfolding her grandfather, spotting scope. The brass bore scratches from decades of use, its weight familiar in her palms. She pressed it to her eye, focusing on the far edge of the training grounds, and imagined wind curling invisibly across the desert floor. Calculations hummed in her mind like a second language. Numbers were steady. People weren't. "Ever shoot anything more dangerous than a paper target?" Cooper's voice jolted her. He leaned against the doorway, smirk in place, his little court of admirers behind him. Set the scope down carefully before turning. 13-point buck, 800 yards, crosswind 15 miles an hour, 20-degree incline. The smirk wavered just slightly, then he scoffed. "Hunting isn't combat." "No," she tilted her head, voice even. "Deer don't shoot back, requires more patience." She left him standing there, the laughter of his friends not quite as certain this time. The next day, the qualification range stretched like a battlefield of silence and wind. 12 lanes, targets hidden at unknown distances. Dust devils twisted across the horizon, daring each candidate to misjudge. Breathed it in, calm. Here, finally, she belonged. Captain Morgan lifted a bullhorn. Shooter standard, 90 seconds, unknown distances, center mass. Engage all targets, accuracy and time, fail either and you're done. 90 seconds. Her gut clenched. 90 seconds wasn't enough for truth. It wasn't enough for the wind, the angle, the mathematics. It was enough for panic, for shortcuts, for lucky guesses. She was assigned lane 8, Cooper lane 9. He smirked at her across the line. Try to keep up. The whistle blew. The desert cracked with rifle fire. Cooper moved like a machine, rapid shots snapping out, his barrel dancing from target to target. Didn't rush. She read the mirage shimmer, the subtle push of wind curling from the canyon. Estimated, adjusted, squeezed. One shot, center mass. Second, third, fourth. Each a whisper of perfection. Her body moved in harmony with the rifle. The trigger broke like glass, her groups then ink circles. But time slipped away. The whistle blew before her final target dropped. Silence. Captain Morgan walked the line, clipboard in hand. When he reached Slane, he studied her targets longer than the rest. Tight groups, precise hits. Better than anyone else on the range. He knew it. Everyone knew it. Outstanding accuracy, he said, voice carrying for all to hear. But incomplete. You failed to engage all targets. That's a failure. The word burned, final, absolute. Cooper grinned when his turn came. His hits were sloppy, 2 complete misses, but all targets engaged within the time limit. Passing score. The whispers began before she'd even cleared her weapon. Told you she couldn't hack it. Support staff. Filing papers. Too slow for combat. That night a folded paper lay on her cot. Orders. Reassignment to the armory. Effective immediately. No retest. No appeal. 4 years of perfect scores, countless hours of practice, erased by a stopwatch. She sat in the dim barracks light, staring at the orders. A hollow ache gnawed at her chest. Was this it? The dream she had chased through deserts and gun smoke, crushed by 15 seconds. Hey, don't look so down. Cooper appeared again, leaning against her doorway. His expression mock sympathetic, but his eyes glimmered cruel. At least now you can clean our rifles properly. Don't scratch the barrel when you're polishing it. His laughter carried down the hall, joined by others. Folded the orders carefully, tucking them into her notebook. She didn't tear them, didn't curse, but something hardened inside her, a quiet, unshakable defiance. They measured speed, she measured truth. On the margin of her notebook, she wrote 3 words in deliberate ink: precision with purpose. The next morning she reported to the armory. Rows of rifles gleamed under fluorescent light, the smell of gun oil and solvent sharp in the air. Master Sergeant Richards, older than time itself, watched her with calloused hands on his hips. So you're the sniper washout. His tone wasn't unkind, just blunt. Heard you shoot straight, just not fast enough for the young bucks. Yes, Master Sergeant. Richard studied her a moment, then shrugged. Well, Hayes, maybe you'll learn something useful here. Half these kids couldn't hit a stationary target at 300 meters if their lives depended on it. For the first time in weeks, smiled. Small, fragile, but real. Among the racks of rifles, she felt it. The story wasn't over, not yet. What she didn't know was that the armory, this exile meant to bury her, was where she would discover the truth no stopwatch could ever measure. And when the time came, that truth would demand more from her than she had ever imagined. What do you do when the world tells you you're finished? For the armory became both punishment and refuge. Rows of rifles lined the walls like silent judges. Each weapon carried a story of someone faster, stronger, already proven. Yet here, in this quiet workshop that smelled of oil and steel, she felt something different: purpose. Master Sergeant Richards taught her the rhythms of maintenance. His hands, from decades of war, moved with the precision of a craftsman. He showed her how to strip rifles blindfolded, how to listen for the faintest flaw in a trigger pull, how to spot the subtle warping of a barrel after 1,000 rounds. You want to know a shooter, he told her once, setting a rifle gently on the bench. Don't watch him fire, look at the weapon he returns. Rifles don't lie. Learned quickly. Cooper would swagger in, drop his rifle carelessly on the counter and make a joke about polishing. But she saw what he didn't: a trigger pulling right under stress, a scope out of alignment from rough handling. She fixed it quietly. He never noticed. At night, she filled her notebook, not just with wind charts anymore, but with observations, rifle conditions, patterns of neglect, performance records she quietly pulled from the computer terminals Richards showed her. Data whispered truths the stopwatch ignored. Candidates who shot fast often shot poorly under pressure. Accuracy crumbled when the environment changed, when stress pressed down like a weight. The armory was supposed to be her exile. Instead, it became her laboratory. Weeks passed. Her silence turned into armor. The jeers didn't touch her anymore. She knew something they didn't: speed meant nothing if you missed when it mattered most. But secrets have a way of surfacing. One afternoon, Captain Morgan walked into the armory. His boots clicked against the concrete floor, his expression hard. Richard stiffened. His pulse quickened. "Hayes," Morgan said, his voice sharp, "you've been accessing performance data outside your clearance." Her throat tightened. Richard stepped forward, protective. "Captain, I authorized." Morgan cut him off. "Don't play me, Richards. I know someone's compiling reports, unauthorized analyses. You think I don't see what's happening?" Steadied her breath. "Sir, if you've seen my reports, then you know the truth. Some of these candidates aren't ready. The data proves it." The silence in the armory grew heavy. Richards shifted uneasily. Morgan stared at her, jaw flexing. "You're a washout, Hayes. Support staff. What makes you think you're qualified to judge Marines who passed?" "Because I fix their rifles, sir. Because I've watched the way they shoot when no one else is looking. Because precision matters more than speed when lives are on the line." For the first time, her voice didn't tremble. She stood chin high, though her heart hammered in her chest. Morgan's eyes narrowed, but behind the anger something flickered: doubt. He knew she might be right. Still, he turned sharply. "You're walking a dangerous line, Sergeant. Drop it, or you'll regret it." When he left, Richards exhaled heavily. "You've got guts, Hayes, but be careful. Morgan doesn't forgive being challenged, especially by someone the system already discarded." Swallowed, nodding, but her resolve only deepened. That night she returned to her notebook. The ink pressed harder into the pages, her handwriting fierce. Precision with purpose. If no one else would speak for it, she would. What she didn't realize was that someone else had heard her defiance. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Parker. The new base commander, unseen until now, had been conducting quiet inspections. She'd heard enough in that confrontation to seek out. Days later, Parker appeared in the armory, her presence sharp, commanding. "Sergeant Hayes," she said, watching adjust a scope, "I've read your reports." Froze. Parker's eyes were piercing but not unkind. "Show me." For an hour, walked her through the data. She showed her how fast shooters degraded under stress, how rifles returned with scars of reckless handling, how the obsession with speed masked dangerous weaknesses. Parker listened, silent, absorbing every word. When finished, she nodded slowly. "You're saying we're training Marines to pass tests, not survive combat?" "Yes, ma'am," answered quietly. "The numbers don't lie." Parker's jaw tightened. "Then you'll continue this work. You'll report directly to me. If Captain Morgan has a problem, he'll take it up with me." The ground shifted beneath his feet. For the first time, someone in authority wasn't dismissing her. They were listening. But listening came at a cost. Word spread across Fort Murphy. The washout had found a patron. Cooper sneered openly when he saw her at briefings. "Look who's got friends in high places. Still doesn't make you sniper material, paper pusher." She ignored him. Silence again her shield. Yet inside something burned brighter. Because Parker gave her access no one else had. Archives, combat records, performance metrics from graduates deployed overseas, and what she found chilled her blood. Snipers who had excelled on the range top scores, fastest times had failed in combat, shots missed under fire, missions compromised, men dead. The data revealed what she had always known: speed without precision killed. She compiled everything into a report thicker than her own notebook. Precision versus speed, a combat readiness analysis. But the timing couldn't have been worse. Major General arrived with an entourage, Pentagon officials, congressional staffers, even cameras. They came to showcase Fort Murphy's sniper program, to celebrate how quickly they were producing elite marksmen. Cooper and his cohort put on a flawless display. Rapid fire, targets dropping in quick succession. Applause, admiration, the general's nod of approval. Stood at the armory window, watching through her grandfather's scope. She saw what the officials couldn't: missed shots edited from the demonstration, targets preset for favorable conditions, illusions of perfection. Her stomach turned. It's a lie. Then came the stress test. Smoke, noise, chaos pumped into the range to simulate combat, and she saw it: precision crumbling. Cooper's groups widened, his breathing rushed. He fought the conditions instead of adapting. And then disaster. A target system malfunctioned. A pop-up at 600 meters directly in line with a maintenance crew working the range. The candidate aimed, oblivious. His heart stopped. She tried the radio. Static, jamming. 3 seconds. She didn't think, she ran. Onto the live range, waving her arms, screaming over the thunder of rifles. Cease fire, personnel downrange. The candidate's finger squeezed. The shot cracked. Dirt exploded 5 meters from the maintenance crew, who dove for cover, realizing too late the bullet meant for a target might have killed them. The range froze, shouts, confusion. Parker stormed in, eyes blazing. Who authorized maintenance during live fire? Morgan stammered. The general demanded answers. But all eyes turned to, sweat-soaked, chest heaving, standing where no one was supposed to stand, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Sir, the system malfunctioned. If I hadn't acted, we'd be explaining deaths today." The truth spread like wildfire. The cover-up was broken. Days later, stood in Parker's office, her report spread across the desk. Himself turned the pages, frown deepening. "According to this analysis, Sergeant Hayes, we've built a program that rewards speed at the cost of judgment." "Yes, sir," said. Her voice wavered, but she held it firm. "And lives are at risk because of it." Morgan tried one last defense. "General, she failed our standards. She's biased." Cut him off, his voice cold. "Captain, 3 days ago, I watched this Marine prevent a tragedy because she saw what none of your qualified snipers did. Perhaps it's your standards that are flawed." He turned to. "Effective immediately, Sergeant Hayes is reinstated as a sniper candidate, and she will help redesign this program." His breath caught. She nodded, barely whispering, "Yes, sir." In that moment, the woman dismissed as too slow, too cautious, too precise, realized something. The very qualities that had branded her a failure were the ones that might save lives. But change wouldn't come easily. Cooper's glare said as much. Morgan's silence said more. The path ahead wasn't just about rifles and training. It was about proving that patience could outlast arrogance, that truth could outshoot illusion. And one day soon, she would be asked to prove it, not on a range, not in theory, but in a desert where failure meant death. Why did their stares feel heavier than the desert heat? Stood before the sniper candidates on the redesigned range. Smoke machines hissed, battlefield sounds pulsed from hidden speakers, and obstacles turned the once-sterile lanes into something closer to chaos. Every eye was on her, some skeptical, some hostile. To them, she wasn't one of them. She was the washout who had somehow clawed her way back. The silence pressed like a weight. She steadied herself, voice clear. "The protocol is built on one truth: combat isn't predictable. Your heart rate will spike. Your visibility will vanish. Your intel will be wrong. If you train only for perfect conditions, you'll fail when it matters." A hand shot up from the back. Sounds like a great way to fail everyone, Sergeant. Didn't flinch. The standard isn't perfection. It's adaptation. How much your accuracy degrades under stress is what matters. Someone who hits 85% under chaos is more lethal than someone who scores 95% when it's easy. Murmurs rippled, doubt hung in the air. Then Cooper's voice cut through, sharp as a blade. "And who made you the expert on stress, Hayes? Last I checked, you've never seen combat." It was the accusation she had feared, the weakness they would always seize. Her eyes met his, calm, unwavering. "You're right, Cooper, I haven't. That's why this isn't about my opinion, it's about data." She gestured, and the screen behind her lit with numbers and graphs, performance records from real deployments. "These aren't my numbers. They're from Marines who trained here, who deployed, who fought. The fastest shooters in this program often failed under fire. Lives were lost. These aren't stories. They're statistics." The murmurs quieted. Cooper's smirk faltered. For the first time, silence meant doubt, but not hers, theirs. "Any more questions?" she asked. None came. The first assessments began. Baseline accuracy, then layered stressors, physical exertion, environmental disruptions, ethical decision-making scenarios. Candidates sweated under desert heat, lungs burning as they sprinted before firing. Smoke blinded scopes. Civilians and combatant targets appeared side by side. Walked the line, watching closely. Many faltered. Shots scattered wide, patience crumbled under pressure. Anger flared as rifles slammed into the dirt, candidates muttering curses. But this wasn't failure, it was revelation. "Combat doesn't care about your stopwatch," she reminded them softly. "It cares about whether you can breathe through the chaos." Some glared, some listened. Cooper did both. At first, his performance was disastrous. His habits, built on speed, on instinct, collapsed under stress. During a night fire drill with explosions booming from hidden speakers, his accuracy dropped below 40%. The others whispered. Their golden boy wasn't golden here. That night found him alone at the cleaning station. His rifle lay disassembled, his movements sharp, angry. She approached quietly. "Rough day." He didn't look up. "I qualified top of my class in Afghanistan. Confirmed kills at 800 meters. Now I can't hit 300 because some paper pusher pumps smoke in my face." "Combat isn't a qualification course," she said gently. His head snapped up, eyes burning. "You think I don't know that? I've been there, I've done it, and I did it well." "I believe you," said. "But answer me this. Did your performance ever degrade? Did stress ever strip away the fundamentals?" His hands stilled, for a long moment silence. Then his voice dropped, low, rough. "Baghdad, 2018, perfect setup. Then an RPG hit the building next door, dust everywhere. My next shot rushed, missed, gave away my position, lost 2 men in the because of it." The anger in his eyes cracked, replaced by something raw, guilt. Sat across from him, voice steady. "That's why this protocol matters, to keep that from happening again." He looked at her for a long moment, then quietly, "Show me." The next morning before dawn, Cooper was waiting at the range. His rifle already set, his jaw tight with determination. "You said it's about stress. Show me how to beat it." Nodded, setting her own gear down. "You don't beat stress, you adapt to it, first breathing." She demonstrated, slow and deliberate. 4 count inhale, 4 hold, 4 exhale, 4 hold, tactical breathing, regulates oxygen, keeps your heart steady. He watched, skeptical but intent. "Try it," she said. He mimicked her, breath measured. Activated a speaker, sudden explosions breaking the dawn quiet. Cooper flinched. His first shot missed wide. "Don't fight it," she coached softly. "Work with it, reset between shots. Breathe, reset, adapt." He tried again, this time closer, again, closer still. Over an hour, his groupings tightened. His recovery between disruptions shortened. His movement slowed but steadied. It's not just breathing, explained. It's mindset. Speed shooters fight stress. Precision shooters use it. You don't ignore the chaos, you let it pass through you. He lowered his rifle, studying the target prints. His performance had improved undeniably. It's counterintuitive, he muttered. Everything I was taught said faster is better. And when were conditions perfect in combat? Asked quietly. He had no answer. Something shifted in him that morning. Not surrender, not yet, but the first crack in the armor. Word spread. If Cooper, their golden boy, was listening, maybe there was merit. Slowly, resistance softened. Questions became less mocking, more curious. Accuracy under stress climbed. By the third week, the data was undeniable. Candidates trained under the protocol maintained 23% higher accuracy in stress simulations than their baselines. Even Captain Morgan had to admit it in meetings. The numbers look good, he said grudgingly, but numbers on a range don't always translate to combat. Lieutenant Colonel Parker's answer was firm. Then we field test it. None of them realized how soon that test would come. At 200, a knock jolted awake. A young corporal, expression grim. Sergeant Hayes, Tactical Operations Center, now. She hurried through the chill desert night. The TOC buzzed with urgency. Screens lit the walls, satellite images of a compound south of the border. Parker stood with General, their faces drawn. This compound belongs to the Sinaloa Enforcement Arm, said, pointing. Intel says they're planning an attack on San, retaliation for a DEA capture. We need confirmation. 4-person recon team. Listened, pulse quickening. Team leader comms 2 snipers, turned to her. One of them is you, Sergeant Hayes. The words landed like thunder. Sir, this is your protocol, time to test it. Morgan bristled. General, with respect, she has no combat experience. Noted, cut him off. But she has judgment, adaptability. That's what this mission needs. His eyes fixed on, unless you don't feel qualified, Sergeant. Her chest tightened. Fear, doubt, 1,000 reasons to step back. But beneath it all, the truth she had lived for months. Silence had no power unless paired with action. I'm qualified, sir. Good. You'll deploy with Staff Sergeant Miller, Corporal, and Sergeant Cooper. The air thickened, glanced at Cooper, his jaw tightened, unreadable. You launch in 6 hours, Parker said. Gear up, full briefing at 400. As turned to leave, Richards caught her arm. His voice was low, steady. This isn't training anymore, real bullets, real consequences. I know, she whispered. He studied her face, then pressed something into her hand. A small compass, worn leather case, edges smooth with age. Got me through Panama, he said. Maybe it'll bring you luck. Her throat tightened. She managed, thank you, Master Sergeant. He shook his head. Don't thank me, just come back alive, all of you. The pre-dawn desert air bit sharp as stepped onto the helipad. 4 figures, gear heavy on their backs, faces set with quiet resolve. The rotors thundered, whined, whipping grit into the night. Staff Sergeant Miller's voice cut through the roar. Remember, recon only. Observe, document, extract. No engagement unless forced. His gaze swept over each of them, landing on last. Stay sharp. The desert forgives no mistakes. The helicopter lifted, skimming low across the border. Darkness swallowed them, stars the only witnesses. And for the first time felt the weight of everything she had fought for. This wasn't about proving herself anymore. It wasn't about stopwatches or whispers. It was about truth, about survival, about whether precision could outlast chaos. Somewhere in the shadows ahead, the desert was waiting to test her. What did the desert hide beneath its silence? The skimmed low, its rotors thumping like a heartbeat against the night. Sat opposite Cooper, both strapped in tight, their rifles resting across their knees. The desert stretched endless below them, dry riverbeds, twisted mesquite, rocky that looked like bones jutting from the earth. The pilot's voice crackled in their headsets. 2 minutes to LZ. Grip tightened on her rifle. First combat deployment. No stopwatch, no controlled range, no safety officers with whistles. Just darkness and the knowledge that somewhere out there, men were preparing to kill. She caught Cooper watching her, his expression unreadable. "Stay close," he said finally. "Do exactly as Miller says, don't try to be a hero." His tone wasn't mockery this time, just fact, a warning born of experience. Before she could answer, the helicopter dropped into a dry wash. Sand and grit exploded around them. They hit the ground running, packs heavy, boots sinking into soft earth. Within seconds, the lifted away, vanishing into the night sky, leaving them alone in the silence. Miller led, his movements efficient, practiced. Followed, then Cooper, then at the rear. No words, only hand signals, boots crunching lightly in the wash as they moved. Above them, stars burned cold and distant, a reminder of how small 4 humans were in this vast desert. Hours passed in silence. The terrain rose, foothills casting jagged shadows under their night vision goggles. Twice Miller froze the column, signaling prone as distant headlights cut across the horizon. Cartel patrols. They lay motionless, hearts pounding until the vehicles passed. By the time the first hint of dawn bled across the horizon, they had reached a cluster of boulders. Miller signaled halt. The team crouched in the shadows. "We hold here until dark," he whispered, "too exposed to move in daylight." They settled into a defensive circle, rifles outward, eyes scanning. The desert heat rose quickly, baking the rocks around them. Sweat trickled down spine. She forced herself to sip water slowly, knowing dehydration was a silent killer. Cooper unfolded a thermal blanket, creating a small patch of shade. He glanced at her. "Sleep if you can." She didn't answer, couldn't. Her mind spun, the reality pressing in. This wasn't a classroom. The men in that compound weren't candidates or instructors. They wouldn't laugh at her, dismiss her, hand her reassignment papers. They would kill her. By nightfall, they moved again. Darkness cloaked them, NVG's glowing green. The terrain grew rougher, steep ravines, rocky slopes, dry washes that swallowed their boots in silence. Just after midnight, Miller signaled halt. Ahead through the rocks saw it, the compound. A collection of low buildings surrounded by a crude perimeter wall. Trucks parked in rows. A dirt airstrip stretching into the valley. Armed men moved through the shadows, weapons slung, radios crackling. Miller crouched, pointing to a ridge overlooking the compound. "Primary op here. Hayes, Cooper, you're on it. And I will take secondary on the access road. Reports every 30 minutes. No engagement unless fired upon." They nodded. Cooper moved first, crawling into a shallow depression in the ridge. Followed, laying her mat, positioning her rifle, adjusting her grandfather, spotting scope. Her hands moved with deliberate care, ritual calming the pounding in her chest. "Movement at the gate," Cooper murmured. Pressed her eye to the scope. 2 SUVs rolled in, headlights cutting across the compound. Armed escorts flanked a central figure. She adjusted focus, breath catching. "That's," Cooper whispered, "Regional Commander. If he's here, this operation's big." Pencil scratched across her notebook. Time, vehicles, numbers, details. The protocol: control what you can. Document everything. Through the night they watched. Men unloading crates of weapons. Trucks arriving, then leaving. Guards rotating with military precision. Forced herself to stay alert, recording every movement, every pattern. The hours blurred into silence, broken only by the scratch of her pencil and the low murmur of Cooper's voice when he spotted something new. At dawn, she took her turn on watch while Cooper slept. The sun revealed more: a weapons cache near the eastern building, communications equipment on the main roof, a reinforced bunker carved into the hillside. Then she saw it. Men unloading demolition equipment, C4 charges, detonators, wires. Her stomach dropped. "Cooper," she nudged him awake. He blinked, then squinted through his scope. His jaw tightened. They're not planning a skirmish. That's enough explosives for coordinated structural attacks. Keyed her radio. Charlie 1 Bravo 2. Tango's unloading demolition equipment, multiple charges, suggests large-scale operation. Over. Miller's voice crackled back. Copy. Maintain observation. Priority is timeline and targets. Out. The day dragged, heat pressing down like a weight. His throat burned with thirst, her muscles ached from stillness. Through her scope she watched gesturing over maps, men pointing at buildings. But from this distance they couldn't hear, couldn't confirm. By late afternoon, frustration gnawed at them both. "We're missing too much," Cooper muttered. "We need ears, not just eyes." Knew he was right. The standard play is distance, safety, but if we're wrong about timing. "People die," he finished. She studied the map, her finger tracing a drainage culvert running close to the compound. Cover, concealment, risk. "One person could get close enough," she said quietly. Cooper's eyes flicked to her. "I'll go, I have the combat experience." "No," her voice was steady though her heart raced. "You're the better shooter. If things go bad, your rifle matters more than mine. I'll go." He stared at her, searching for hesitation. "Hayes." "I won't be seen," she cut in. "And I'll maintain comms, minimum gear, fast in and out." For a long moment silence, then he nodded reluctantly. "Sidearm only, radio on vibrate, back before dark." Stripped down her kit, pistol, binoculars, compact camera, radio. She left the rifle behind. It felt like leaving part of herself, but weight meant noise, and noise meant death. Cooper keyed the radio. Charlie 1 Bravo 2. Bravo 3 conducting short-range recon to verify intel. Report at 1900 hours. Understood, Bravo 2. Maintain discipline. Out. With a final nod from Cooper, slipped down the ridge. The culvert was dry, a concrete trench built for flash floods, perfect cover. She moved slowly, every step deliberate, freezing whenever voices carried too close. The compound loomed ahead, close enough now that she could hear Spanish drifting through the night. She raised her binoculars. Men clustered around vehicles, weapons gleaming under work lights. On a table, building plans spread wide, her breath caught. She raised her camera, snapping quick, silent shots. A school, a police station, a government office, civilian targets. Her stomach turned cold. The attack wasn't in days, it was tonight. Then a sound, a rock clattering under her boot, echoing like thunder in the quiet. Voices shouted, lights swept, boots pounded. Flattened against the culvert wall, heart hammering. Shadows moved closer. Rifles clattered as men barked orders. She keyed her radio twice, danger signal. Up on the ridge, Cooper's scope tracked the search party, 4 armed men moving towards position. He had seconds to act. His eyes shifted across the compound, landing on a fuel drum. He exhaled, slow, steady, squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked. A heartbeat later, fire roared as the drum exploded, flames licking the sky. Chaos erupted. Shouts, men running, weapons raised. The search party turned, sprinting back toward the blaze. In the confusion, scrambled, crawling from the culvert, sprinting low across the terrain. Her lungs burned, ankle twisting on loose rocks, but she didn't stop. 15 minutes later, she reached the ridge, collapsing beside Cooper, chest heaving. "They're hitting tonight," she gasped. 3 targets, civilians. She held up the camera, trembling hands clutching proof. Cooper's radio crackled. Charlie 1 Bravo 2, report. Position compromised, Cooper answered. Intel confirmed. Attack tonight. Moving to emergency rally point Alpha. Copy Alpha in 20, out. They moved quickly, abandoning gear, leaving only essentials. The desert stretched before them, unforgiving, vast. Behind them, cartel voices rose, engines roared. The hunt had begun. Extraction was 45 minutes away. 45 minutes to survive the night. And knew one thing with cold certainty. This was no longer a test of protocols or theories. This was life and death, and the desert had just made its move. How long could 4 people outrun an army? The desert didn't care who you were, Marine, cartel, or lost traveler. It stripped you down to survival, felt it in her lungs as she ran, legs burning, her pack jarring against her shoulders. Behind them, engines roared to life. Lights swept across the desert floor. The cartel had mobilized fast. "Pick it up," Miller hissed, leading them across a dry ravine. "We've got 15 minutes before they lock this grid down." Pushed harder, each breath sharp and shallow. Her mind replayed what she had seen: the maps, the explosives, the targets. Civilians who didn't even know death was racing toward them. The weight of it pressed heavier than her pack. A spotlight sliced across the ridge behind them. A truck bounced into the ravine, men shouting in Spanish. Bullets snapped overhead, spraying rock and dust. The team dove behind a boulder, rifles up. "Smoke now," Miller barked. The corporal hurled a canister. Smoke blossomed thick, swallowing them in a cloud. Miller fired controlled bursts, keeping the pursuers pinned. Cooper's rifle cracked once, twice. 2 shadows collapsed near the truck. "Move," Miller ordered. They sprinted again, zigzagging across the uneven terrain. Her lungs burned, her legs trembling, but she forced herself forward. The extraction point was still miles away. Another spotlight swept across the ravine, this time closer. Dropped to the ground, heart hammering, trucks circled. Voices echoed. The sound of a horn blared, a signal. "They're calling reinforcements," Cooper muttered. "They'll box us in." Miller cursed under his breath, pulling out his map. "We won't make Alpha if we keep heading west. Too hot." His finger jabbed north. "Secondary rally points here, 10 clicks. Rougher terrain, but we can shake pursuit." 10 kilometers, his chest tightened. With trucks and night vision against them, it felt impossible, but there was no choice. They pushed north, scrambling over jagged ridges. Slipped, knees scraping rock, but she didn't slow. Fear kept her moving, raw and electric. By the 3rd ridge, the roar of engines faded slightly. The terrain was working in their favor, swallowing sound, breaking lines of sight. But then the sharp crack of gunfire. A round ricocheted off stone inches from his head. She dropped flat, heart in her throat. Cooper returned fire instantly, muzzle flashes cutting the dark. "2 shooters on the ridge," he shouted. Miller gritted his teeth. "We don't have time for this. Haye, Cooper suppress, and I will flank." Steadied her breath, rifle against her shoulder. Through her scope, she caught a figure silhouetted against the stars. She adjusted for wind, squeezed impact. The figure collapsed. Beside her, Cooper's shot dropped the second. Silence, except for their breathing. Miller and reappeared, sliding down the ridge. "Good work, let's move." But relief was short-lived. In the distance, dozens of headlights flickered to life, trucks spreading out, encircling. "We won't outrun that," Cooper muttered. Miller's jaw clenched. "We buy time, break into pairs, you're with me. Haye, Cooper, you head east, find cover, keep them chasing. We'll regroup at Bravo Rally." Stomach dropped, splitting meant vulnerability, but Miller was right. Together they'd be swallowed. "Go," he barked. The team split and Cooper cutting east across broken ground. Their boots scraped over loose shale, breath ragged. Every muscle screamed. Finally they dropped into a shallow gully, hidden from sight. Collapsed to one knee, chest heaving. Sweat stung her eyes. Cooper crouched beside her, scanning with his scope. "They'll sweep this way. We need a diversion or we're cornered." Wiped grit from her face. Diversion means noise. Fire, light, something to pull them off. His gaze flicked to her pack. "You've got the camera, flash module." She nodded slowly. "Yeah, bright enough to look like muzzle flash under NVGs." A plan took shape, dangerous, desperate. They rigged the camera flash to a rock outcrop, set to burst repeatedly. Hands shook as she worked, adrenaline making the fine motor skills harder. Cooper covered her, eyes never leaving the ridge. When the first truck swept into view, Lights cutting across the valley, Cooper whispered, "Now." Triggered the flash. Bright bursts lit the rocks like gunfire. The cartel reacted instantly, shouts, rifles barking, vehicles swerving toward the decoy. Dust plumed, engines roared. "They bought it," Cooper muttered. They slipped deeper into the gully, moving fast, putting distance between them and the chaos. But the diversion wouldn't last long. After an hour of crawling, climbing, stumbling through jagged stone, his body screamed for rest. Her thighs quivered, her ankle throbbed from an earlier twist, but she didn't stop, couldn't. Then the crack of a rifle. A round snapped past her head, embedding in the dirt. She dropped, rolling behind a rock. "Sniper," Cooper hissed, scanning the. Another shot rang out. Dirt exploded inches from his boot. Panic flared hot in her chest. She pressed herself flat, breath shallow. "Stay down," Cooper ordered. He shifted, scanning through his scope. Seconds stretched. Another shot whined, grazing stone near his head. He cursed under his breath. Can't spot him, good shooter, patient. His pulse thundered. The irony cut cruel, her first combat pinned by a sniper. But then instinct kicked in. She studied the pattern, the delay between shots, the angle of impact. Her mind traced wind, distance, terrain. She whispered, 700 meters, east ridge, second outcrop from the left. Cooper adjusted, scanning, his breath stilled. Got him, one clean shot, silence. Let out a shaky breath, her body trembling with release. Cooper glanced at her, hell of a call. She managed a faint smile, precision with purpose. For the first time his expression softened. Respect, not mockery, not doubt, respect. They moved again, pushing toward Bravo Rally. By dawn, the desert stretched endless, unforgiving. Every step felt heavier, every breath raw. But's mind stayed sharp. She thought of the civilians on those maps, of the faces she would never see but could still save. That thought pulled her forward when her legs wanted to collapse. By midday, they reached a ridge overlooking the rally point. Empty, no sign of Miller or. His gut twisted, they should be here. Cooper scanned with his scope. Wait, movement. Two figures stumbled into view from the ravine below. Miller and both alive, but leaned heavily on Miller, blood staining his sleeve. His chest clenched. She scrambled down the slope, helping them up. Face was pale, teeth gritted. Got clipped, he muttered. Ambush on the way in, we shook M, but he trailed off, wincing. Miller's eyes were hard. They're still on us. We've got maybe an hour before they sweep this area. Looked at wound, through and through in the upper arm, bleeding controlled but weakening him fast. He wouldn't move quickly. She forced her voice steady. Then we make our stand here. Miller shook his head. Negative. Mission comes first. We get the intel out. If we die, civilians die with us. The truth cut sharp. They couldn't all outrun pursuit, not with wounded. Cooper's jaw tightened. So what's the play? Silence stretched. His heart pounded as the weight settled on her shoulders. She already knew the answer. A diversion, a sacrifice. Someone had to stay behind. The thought chilled her, but it was undeniable. The desert had taken everything from her already, her reputation, her pride, her place among them. But it could give her one thing back, purpose. She looked at Miller, then Cooper. Her voice was quiet but steady. I'll do it. Cooper's head snapped toward her. The hell you will. Met his eyes. I'm the least experienced. You're the better shooter. Miller's the leader, needs medical. I'm the logical choice. Miller started to argue, but her tone left no room. I'll draw them off. Long enough for you to make the extraction. That's what matters. The silence after her words felt heavier than any gunfire. Finally, Miller nodded slowly, grim. If you're sure. His chest tightened, fear clawing, but she forced herself to breathe. I'm sure. Cooper's jaw worked, anger, frustration, something deeper flashing across his face. But he didn't argue again. He just said, low and fierce, then make it count. Adjusted her gear, stripped down to essentials. She felt the compass Richards had given her, its leather case warm in her palm. She tucked it into her pocket. She rose, scanning the horizon where the dust of pursuit already smudged the sky. Her heartbeat slowed, the fear quieted. This was her moment. She would not waste it. What did courage sound like when no one was left to hear it? Felt the desert silence pressing against her skin as she broke away from the group. Miller and Cooper slipped north toward the extraction point, their figures swallowed by the rocks. She turned east alone, boots crunching softly, each step taking her farther from safety. The horizon shimmered with heat. Dust plumes rose in the distance, cartel trucks spreading wide, hunting. She knew they'd find her trail soon. That was the point. She crested a ridge, dropped into a shallow basin, perfect for drawing them in. She knelt, unpacked the last of her gear, smoke grenades, a spare magazine, her pistol. Her rifle was her anchor. She set it across a boulder, adjusted the scope, forced her breathing slow. The first truck appeared minutes later, headlights cutting through dust. Then another. Engines growled, men shouting. She sighted in, squeezed. A driver slumped, the truck swerving, crashing into a wash. Shouts erupted, chaos spilling across the basin. She fired again, controlled, deliberate. Not to kill them all, impossible, but to anger them, to hold their attention. Precision with purpose. Bullets snapped past her, chewing stone. She ducked, shifted, fired again. Her heart pounded, but her breath stayed steady, anchored in the rhythm she had drilled 1,000 times. Then the crack of a rifle, different, sharper, a sniper. She shifted position instinctively, but too late. The round slammed into her thigh. White-hot pain exploded, her leg buckling. She gasped, falling hard against the rock. For a moment the world shrank to pain. Fire spreading through bone, nerves screaming. She clawed at the wound, blood soaking her pants, slick between her fingers. Her femur shattered. She knew it instantly. She, studied enough combat medicine, seen the aftermath. She wouldn't walk again, not here, not now. The desert spun around her. The urge to scream clawed at her chest, but she bit it back, forcing her breath short, shallow. Not yet. Not here. The radio buzzed at her side. Cooper's voice sharp, urgent. "Hayes, what's happening? Report." Her hand trembled as she keyed the mic. "I'm hit. Legs gone. Keep moving." "Negative. We're coming back." Her voice cut sharper than she thought possible. "No, you turn around, you all die. I've got them on me. That's the mission. Get the intel out." Silence crackled. Then Miller's voice, steady but heavy. "She's right. Stay on course. Hayes, hold as long as you can." Let the radio fall. She pressed gauze from her kit against the wound, hands shaking. Blood still seeped. She cinched a tourniquet high on her thigh, teeth grinding as pain spiked white. The world blurred, narrowed, but she forced her focus back. The trucks were closer now. Dozens of men pouring out, rifles raised, shouting. Her scope wavered as she steadied her breath, sighting. She squeezed. A man dropped. She shifted, fired again. Another fell. They ducked for cover, returning fire. Bullets shredded stone around her, shards slicing her face. She stayed low, repositioned. But movement behind her, flanking. She twisted, raised her pistol, fired blind. One man fell, another rushed closer. She grappled, desperate, jamming the barrel into his chest, firing until the slide locked empty. He collapsed heavy over her, nearly smothering her. She shoved him off, gasping, vision swimming. Pain consumed her, but purpose anchored her. Hold them, buy time. She dragged herself back to the boulder, elbows grinding into stone, her shattered leg trailing uselessly. Every movement lit nerves aflame. She bit down on her sleeve to keep from screaming. The ridge loomed 400 meters ahead. If she could reach it, she could funnel them, force them into her scope. But 400 meters with a destroyed femur. She looked at her compass, the worn leather case Richards had given her. She whispered, breath ragged, precision with purpose. Then she began to crawl. Each pull of her arms dragged her body inches forward. Rocks tore at her elbows, grit embedded in her palms. Her legs screamed, bone grinding, blood slicking the ground. She left a trail behind her, dark against pale dust. She crawled 10 meters, stopped, breathed. Pain blurred the edges of her vision. She forced her mind elsewhere, to Parker's steady eyes, to Richard's hands teaching her rifles, to the laughter she used to hear when she missed the stopwatch. She pulled again, 10 more meters. The world shrank to rhythm: pull, drag, breathe, pull, drag, breathe. Behind her, shouts grew louder. Engines revved, men advancing. But every shot she managed slowed them, forced them into cover, kept them focused on her instead of the others. 100 meters. Her arms trembled, muscles shredded from effort. Her throat was raw, lips cracked, but she didn't stop. 200. A bullet smashed into the dirt beside her, showering grit across her face. She fired back, dropped another silhouette, then dragged herself forward again. 300. Her body was breaking. Her vision tunneled, black creeping in at the edges. She pressed her forehead to the earth, breath shallow. No one's watching. No one will remember if you stop now. The thought slithered in, cruel, tempting. But another voice rose against it, her own, fierce and quiet. Dignity doesn't speak, it acts. She gritted her teeth, pulled again. 400 meters. She collapsed behind a rock, chest heaving, tears streaking dirt on her face. She could barely lift her rifle now. Her hands shook, blood soaking the grip. But through the scope she saw them. Cartel fighters advancing cautiously, pinned by her fire. Every minute she held them here was another mile. Miller and Cooper gained. She steadied her breath one last time, sighted, fired, another fell, then another. Her magazine clicked empty. She reloaded with trembling hands, forcing the bolt forward, fired again. The return fire was relentless. Stone shattered inches from her face. She felt fragments cut deep, warm blood sliding down her cheek. Her body screamed surrender, but her will refused. She fired until the magazine ran dry, fired until her arms gave out, fired until the world blurred into light and dust. And when she could fight no more, she lay against the rock, rifle across her chest, the compass warm in her palm. Her breath slowed. The desert roared with voices, engines, chaos closing in. But in her mind there was only silence, soft, steady, proud. Because she had held. Because they would make it. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. How heavy could silence be when it carried the weight of a life? The desert was quiet again when Miller, Cooper, and reached the extraction zone. Quiet except for the rasp of breath, the pounding of their boots, the dull roar of the rotors ahead. The landing zone was a barren patch of earth, rotor wash whipping dust into a storm. The bird hovered, side door open, crew chief waving them in. Relief should have hit them like oxygen, but it didn't. It couldn't. Because one of them wasn't there. Miller half-dragged into the cabin, shouting over the roar. He's hit bad, upper arm through and through, needs a corpsman now. The crew pulled in, strapping him down. His face was pale, lips trembling. Where, Hayes? He whispered. No one answered. Cooper stood frozen at the edge of the ramp, scanning the horizon as if she might appear, crawling, limping, staggering, rifle in hand. She didn't. The crew chief shouted, "We've got a lift, sir. Hostiles closing." Miller's jaw clenched. His voice was steel. "We hold 30 seconds, that's it." 30 seconds stretched like a lifetime. Cooper's heart hammered, vision burning from staring at the ridge line. He imagined her bleeding, fighting, alone. His fists clenched so hard his knuckles whitened. But no figure appeared through the dust. No signal, nothing but silence. "Up, up," Miller barked. The lifted, rotors thundering, the desert dropping away beneath them. Cooper leaned out the open door, eyes locked on the ground, searching. But the basin where they'd split off was smoke and dust now, a storm swallowing truth. The desert kept its secrets. They landed back across the border at dawn, was rushed into medical hands, his blood staining the deck. Miller gave the formal report, voice clipped, professional, detached, because if it cracked, everything would unravel. Intel confirmed. Civilian targets identified. Attack planned for 31st of the month. Demolition charges already distributed. Sergeant Hayes engaged enemy force alone to enable team extraction. She did not exfiltrate. The officer taking notes hesitated, then wrote the last line. Did not exfiltrate. Cooper stood off to the side, hands shaking, jaw clenched. He didn't speak. Couldn't. His uniform was streaked with dust, blood not his own. His rifle still smelled of smoke. But all he could feel was her absence, like a hole torn through the air itself. Parker was waiting on the tarmac, his face unreadable, eyes locked on Miller. Casualties. One wounded, one missing in action. Miller's tone was ice. Parker's eyes flicked to Cooper. He opened his mouth to ask, but Cooper cut him off, voice low, ragged. She bought us every second we needed. Don't call her missing. His eyes burned sharp. She knew what she was doing. For the first time, Parker had no reply. The intel Hayes had died for hit Washington like fire. Operations spun overnight. The planned cartel attacks, schools, government buildings, crowded streets, were dismantled before they began. Civilians lived who never knew they had been marked for death. Her name was written in reports, in briefings, and after-action summaries, but only as a line item. Hayes, status, presumed KIA. A line on paper couldn't carry the truth of her crawl. Weeks later, Cooper found himself back on the range, the same sterile expanse where he'd once mocked her. The smoke machines were still there. The battlefield sounds, the shifting targets, the chaos she had insisted mattered. This time no one laughed. Candidates ran through the drills, their breathing ragged, their shots slower but steadier. The protocol was no longer theory, it was gospel. Miller stood at the tower, clipboard in hand, watching. Funny, he said quietly, she'll never see this. The thing she built, it's real now. Cooper adjusted his scope, sighting downrange. His voice was flat. She knew, that's why she stayed. He fired, the shot cracking across the field. Bulls, despite the smoke curling around his vision. He lowered the rifle, breathing steady. For the first time, he didn't care about speed. At night, Cooper couldn't escape her. In his dreams, he saw her crawling, dust sticking to sweat, blood trailing behind her, eyes locked forward. He woke gasping, hands trembling, unable to shake the image. Guilt gnawed. He had been ready to dismiss her, to fight her, to call her less. And she had done what he couldn't, given everything without hesitation. Some nights he hated her for it, other nights he her, always he remembered her. 2 months later, Parker summoned them to a quiet briefing room. Only Miller and Cooper. A folder sat on the table, its cover stamped in red. Parker's face was grim. Satellite sweeps confirm no body recovered. Enemy chatter suggests heavy casualties, but he hesitated, then met their eyes. There's no confirmation of Hayes' death. Cooper's heart slammed. You think she's alive? We don't know. If captured, she'd be moved quickly, deep into cartel territory. Chances of survival, Parker let the silence finish the sentence. Miller's jaw tightened. We don't leave our own. Parker's voice was firm. We don't launch recovery without intel, not unless command authorizes. He closed the folder. Until then, she remains MIA. Cooper's fists clenched. The idea of her still out there, alone, suffering, was unbearable, and yet impossible to dismiss. As they left the room, Miller's voice was low, steady. Hope's a dangerous thing, Cooper, but sometimes it's all we've got. Back at the barracks, Cooper sat alone with his rifle disassembled, the ritual of cleaning giving his hands something to do while his mind spiraled. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small object. The compass. Richards had given it to her. She must have pressed it into his hand when they split, or maybe Miller had carried it back without realizing. Its leather case was, edges worn smooth. Cooper turned it over in his palm, thumb tracing the grooves. The needle still pointed north, always steady, always true. He closed his eyes, whispering words he didn't believe in but needed to say. Wherever you are, Hayes, you're not forgotten. The compass lay warm in his hand, and for the first time since that night, he felt something close to peace. Not because the pain was gone, but because the weight of silence had meaning. The desert would always remember her, so would they. But the question lingered, sharp and haunting. Had the desert taken her completely, or was she still out there fighting in shadows? No one knew. And maybe that was the point. Because heroes don't always need graves. Sometimes, the truest legacy is the silence left behind, silence heavy enough to change the world. What is the measure of a life? Is it counted in years, in medals, in the sound of your name spoken in a crowded hall? Or is it found in the quiet places, moments when no one is watching, when you choose to act not for glory, not for recognition, but because it is right? For Hayes, there was no ceremony, no folded flag returned to grieving parents, no crowd of Marines standing at attention while a bugle played. There wasn't even a body to bury, only dust, only silence. And yet she left more than absence. In the months that followed, her name became something whispered with weight, not in headlines, not in speeches, but in the spaces where it mattered, training rooms, briefing tables, the minds of those who had seen her fight. The protocol was no longer a curiosity. It spread across teams, taught by instructors who no longer rolled their eyes. Candidates were drilled until their lungs burned, until smoke and chaos blurred their vision, until they could no longer rely on speed alone. One night after another brutal session, a young recruit collapsed beside Cooper, chest heaving, sweat soaking his uniform. "Sir," he gasped, "does this really matter? Nobody can operate under this kind of pressure." Cooper looked at him for a long time. His answer was quiet. "You're right, nobody can, but somebody did. And because she did, civilians are alive right now who wouldn't be otherwise. So don't tell me it doesn't matter." The recruit didn't ask again. In a small classroom, recovered slowly, his arm still stiff from the bullet wound, he stood before a group of new Marines, his voice rough but steady. "You'll hear stories about Sergeant Hayes," he said. "You'll hear she crawled 600 meters with her femur shattered to save her team. You'll hear she bought us time with her life. That's true, but that's not what you need to remember." He paused, eyes moving across the room. "What you need to remember is that she didn't wait for permission to matter. She was dismissed, mocked, ignored, and she still found a way to prove that what she carried inside was bigger than what anyone thought of her. If you take anything from her story, let it be that." The room was silent. Miller, ever the stoic, carried her name like a stone in his chest. He didn't speak of her often, but late at night when he sat alone with maps spread before him, planning missions, he found himself asking what she would see that he didn't, what variables he'd missed, what blind spots he hadn't accounted for. Once, Richards caught him staring too long at the desert map pinned to the wall, still thinking about her. Miller didn't look up. "Every time I plan, I hear her voice, precision with purpose. It won't shut up." Richards gave a faint, weary smile. "Good, maybe it's not supposed to." Parker, who had once watched her walk into the briefing room invisible, found himself standing before a new group of operators. His voice carried the weight of memory. "You're here because you think you're ready," he said. "But readiness isn't measured by how fast you can shoot or how loud you can shout. It's measured when no one sees you, when the world looks away, when you're dismissed, doubted, left behind. That's when you find out who you are." He let silence stretch the way she once had. Then, "Remember Hayes, she wasn't the loudest, she wasn't the fastest, but when it mattered most, she was the one who refused to stop crawling." And Cooper carried her differently. Not as a ghost, not as guilt, but as something sharper, a compass. He kept Richard's gift on him always, its leather case, the needle steady. Some nights he sat with it in his hand, the desert's wind echoing in memory, and he spoke to her in the quiet. "You were right," he'd whisper. "It's not about speed. It's about what you hold on to when everything else breaks." And in those moments, he felt less alone. The civilians she saved never knew her name. Parents tucked children into bed, teachers unlocked classrooms, workers filled offices, all unaware of how close death had come, how one woman's crawl through the dust had pulled it away. But maybe that was right. Maybe that was the measure. Because she hadn't fought for recognition. She hadn't fought to be remembered. She had fought so others could live unknowing, unscarred. Her silence was their laughter. Her sacrifice was their tomorrow. Sometimes late at night, when the base was still, Parker walked the halls alone. He would stop at the wall where the names of the fallen were etched into steel. Haye's wasn't there. MIA carried no inscription. But he stood before the blank space anyway, his hand resting against the cold metal. In the silence, he thought of her voice, the quiet determination, the fire beneath the calm. He thought of the crawl, the shattered bone, the dust mixing with blood. And he whispered words no one else could hear. "You didn't vanish. You became part of all of us." What is the measure of a life? For Haye's, it wasn't medals or parades or names carved in stone. It was the way she changed the air in a room without ever shouting. The way she made others see differently, even when they refused to look at her. The way she held a line no one else could see until she stood on it alone. The measure of her life was in the seconds she bought, the lives she preserved, the dignity she carried when no one believed in her. And so the story ends not with gunfire, not with victory parades, but with a quiet truth. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.